What's up, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you might be around the world? Of course, I am Jay Campbell, and you are here. Uh-oh, I have something at the bottom. I have two echoes. I apologize. And I also have a link from the last time we were live. I'm here with my trusty partner and business associate, Hunter Williams, and of course, the one and only Laura Knight-Jadczyk and Harrison. I hope I pronounce her name right, bro. Koehli, right?
Close. Koehli.
I'm sorry. I apologize. And we are going to be talking about Harrison's newest book, which is absolutely amazing. And it's called Beyond Disclosure. We're all reading it. As I told him, I'm only on page 129. Hunter's finished it. Harrison wrote it. So he's very familiar with the whole entire book. And of course, Laura, it's based on the adventures of the Cassiopaeans. And of course, Laura's work, the Wave series, and many other books. And it's truly an amazing book. As I shared with those guys recently, there's people in Hunter and I's private membership group that have said it's changed their life reading it. And it truly is a profound book. And it really, it's a summation of a lot of the work that Laura has done and the Cassiopaeans as far as the information that they've given through their sessions, you know, in the last, is it 30 years, Laura, or is it longer than 30?
Yeah, let's see. 2024 would have been what, 30 years, Harrison?
It's coming up on 31.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought?
Well, I mean, I would say, again, credit to Harrison, how awesome it is that you've been able to collate, you know, all the work from the sessions and all the books that Laura wrote. And you've done it. I mean, again, I'm only 129 pages in. I'll let Hunter summarize it even better because he's read the entire thing. But I think you've done a really awesome job of collating a lot of diverse work and prose from, you know, the sessions and of course timelines and stuff like that. I thought you've done such a great job. But I mean, Hunter, you want to comment real quick on your thoughts?
Well, yeah, in light of today being Easter, happy Easter to everyone. I was thinking about Laura's most recent book, From Paul to Mark, and I know we had talked on one show about that. If you ever watch the crime TV shows of the bulletin board where you have all of the tax on there with clues that leads it to it, and for me, that was Laura's book on Christianity. And I think what Harrison has done is we've obviously read The Wave, but he's taken a lot of the more recent sessions that weren't in some of the Wave books and included them into this book. And what he did an amazing job of was categorically and thematically structuring these into where it's one coherent narrative that I think a person that hasn't been exposed to Laura's work could read this and come in with an open mind and an objective mind and look at some of the stuff. And I think there's a preponderance of evidence to support hyperdimensionality itself, but then also to kind of the agenda of what is going on in the current day. So that's what I loved about this is it's very up to date with current events. And also I know for me, it helped me make a lot of sense of kind of some of the more current events. And also what Harrison, again, to credit him, did a really good job of was including a lot of the supporting work that Laura has had in the Wave books, but even more so some of the other researchers that are in this space to kind of make it comport with a lot of what the Seeds have said. So kudos to you, Harrison. I'm in the process of writing an Amazon review right now. So everyone should go buy this book, leave an Amazon review. And I think it's on Kindle now, right, Harrison? It's available in Kindle format. So if you can't get the physical book, or I know some countries you can't get the physical book, definitely check out the Kindle. But I just want to say thank you. And we definitely can dive into some of the topics today. I know I've got a lot of questions and Jay will too. So I just want to say thank you guys. And everyone, if you are listening right now, please go buy the book, support the work, because it's pretty incredible. And like Jay said, people in our private group, Jay and I, obviously our lives have been transformed by Laura and Harrison's work, but even people in our group and our health optimization group have as well. So thank you guys. And I'm excited to talk to you today.
I did want to say, which I was actually insanely my head exploded when I was looking at the Amazon section for your book today, and there's only one review posted.
Yeah, that's a new book.
I was like, what? Like, this is one of the most influential, impactful books that I've ever read in my life, and I've read not as many as Laura, but a lot. And I'm like, why is there only one? I was actually instantly thinking, oh, it's just Amazon suppressing the algorithm. They don't want anybody to find your book.
They actually do that. I don't, for people, if you're interested in this type of thing, they do slow roll reviews. They have like a big AI thing that kind of slow rolls reviews and make sure they're not from friends and family. And then also too, they do a verification. So for anyone that's ever published a book on Amazon, as I know you both, Laura and Harrison, know, they do like a slow rolling of reviews. It's actually kind of creepy what the AI knows. If you have a product you sell on Amazon, I don't know if this is similar to the book, they actually monitor your phone number, and then whoever is in your phone book and your social media, that if they leave reviews, technically is against the terms of service to have friends and family leave reviews, that they will shut down the reviews, and actually you can lose your product listing on Amazon if you get caught having friends and family go leave reviews. So how's that for big tech and big business today? But just funny fact for people out there that don't know that.
They actually, Amazon has actually banned me from writing reviews, and I think they even took down all of my reviews that I've written over the last 20 years. And it was just a really bizarre experience because, well, anyway, they did.
They've done the same thing to me, Laura. I actually tell all my friends that, and Hunter knows this, I can't really leave reviews for your books because they won't show. It won't show. They've done the same thing to me. It's insane.
Yeah. So, they're not interested in truth. They're not interested in what people are interested in. They're not interested in, genuine, legitimate feedback. It's all controlled,
Right.
By AI, because no matter how many times you write to dispute what they've done, you just get the same exact mechanical message back again and again and again.
Right.
So
it's the same thing with all of these platforms that we're on too. I mean, we all know that, but I want to go to you real quick, Laura, before we go to Harrison. What are your thoughts on his book and what he was able to do with like the insane amount of information that you've put forth in the last 31 years?
Well, let me give you just a little background, something I've been thinking about for however many days. I recently corresponded with a distant cousin of mine, not too distant, my mother's first cousin, and about genealogy. And then she found out about my various interests, and I said, well, and she wondered how I came to write a book about Christianity. And I says, well, it's really kind of an offshoot of my general interest in the nature of reality. And of course, my interest in the nature of reality led me through the sciences. Early on in my life, I was a science major in college, biochemistry. And then, I went to nursing school. I worked for the state of Florida, and I had, basically kind of normal life, except for the fact that I was constantly reading about this other reality, because it seemed to me that if you want to know the nature of reality, pay attention to it. And I was paying attention, and I had some weird experiences. I knew people who had other weird experiences. I read about people who had weird experiences, things like ghosts and hauntings and poltergeist phenomena, things that appeared and things that disappeared, all kinds of things. I drew the line at UFOs, but, that's a whole other thing. But so for me, if you want to know about reality, pay attention. So I was paying attention. I was saying, well, if, these things that happen in our reality, and they happen a lot, and they happen to people who are really credible witnesses. So why is science not paying attention to this? Why are they not studying it? Why are they considering it to be, actually a forbidden topic? And, so that just made me more curious about it. So, as I said, I drew the line at UFOs because I figured that I had a pretty good theory about reality after a certain number. By the time I was 40 years old, I figured I had a pretty good theory. And the theory was that, mind does everything, that people who think that they've been abducted, or people who think that they see UFOs, they're just acting out something that's in their subconscious. And I was rather scornful of people who had such experiences, and I would declare, well, they've got the millennial disease, because everybody was, expecting the world to end in 2000 or some terrible thing to happen, or 2012, give or take a few years. So I thought I had a pretty good handle on it, and that mind did everything. Of course, there would be a lot of physicists and scientists of various sorts who would disagree with that, because they've gone, completely in the materialist direction. But reality doesn't really respond to that. Reality is very, very strange, and sometimes it's stranger than others, and it's always unprovable in the sense of being able to have repeatable experiences. But then so is quantum physics. The thing is quantum physicists are generally allergic to any discussion of the paranormal, yet they deal with things that have paranormal effects, the whole thing. So in any event, I was paying attention to reality, and making a long story short, that led to the Cassiopaean Experiment. And after some fairly dedicated work, because I'd studied enough to have an idea of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to achieve it. So the Cassiopaean Experiment, proceeded, and things went along. And then I realized, well, the answers we're getting from this source are so, in some cases, wildly different from what has been pronounced by, such as Madame Blavatsky and some of the older esotericists and so forth. And I said, because Cassiopaeans are kind of like, give answers that are semi-scientific or somewhat scientific, and then semi-esoteric, or definitely esoteric. So there was kind of like a combination of things. So years went by. Harrison came upon the scene, and he just has this ability to boil things down, and to his memory, I'm sure, is almost as good as mine when he's working on a project. He remembers stuff, or things ping in his brain, and he goes looking for it and finds it. And frankly, I'll tell you that since I stopped doing all the transcribing myself, I don't remember all the sessions as well as I did the earlier ones, because for me, transcribing it puts it in my memory banks. But now I have somebody else. I got so sick of transcribing. I mean, come on.
Right.
Somebody else does the transcribing. And so now it's a good thing that Harrison's there, because, he's able to pick up all those things that I've forgotten about. So he came along. He wrote a series of articles that we published on our website, our news website, actually, called the Cassiopaean Hit List. And he would go through the things the C's had predicted, or generally predicted, because they're not really big on hard and fast predictions, but they're okay on fairly general predictions. And he wrote this amazing series of articles, and I think that probably should go into a little book too, Harrison, if you ever get around to it. And now then he started the Cassiopaean Substack, and what he did was pretty much in a more modernized way what I did with the Wave.
Right.
He is going, and he's, he'll bring up like a transcript from the series, but then he'll go looking, did anybody else experience something like this, or encounter something like this, or have a clue that it might be this way, which was pretty much what I was doing with the Wave. It was like, okay, the Caesar said this. Is there any evidence that supports it? Even if that evidence is not necessarily hard scientific evidence, but is there any evidence anybody else has experienced this or observed this? So that's basically what he has done, is he has gone and found all of this other evidence that meshes and merges or weaves into the whole narrative of what the seas have said. I'd say what he's written is much more about other things. I mean, the seas come in there, but he's done an awful lot of other additional reading outside of what I've even read, because he's kept up with it. You know, I turned my attention to other projects. You know, he has kept up, and he's kept kind of focused on this whole UFO alien disclosure project issue. And, you know, nowadays, if I want to know what's going on, I ask Harrison. You know, he doesn't ask me.
Right.
So it's really a pretty amazing piece of work, because he's really on top of some of the latest information, the latest research, the latest revelations from like government informants or other researchers who are connected to government informants. And he's brought a lot of that in, a lot more of that sort of thing than I did. I didn't have really any government information, because at the time everything was locked down, totally tight. In the last however many years, 10, 15 years, with the, you know, this push for disclosure, there have been a lot of bits and pieces of information that started leaking out, you know, and then more and more and more. And Harrison has been on top of that. I mean, especially some of the whistleblowers who've come out and had plenty to say, some of the ones who've worked on secret government projects. And lo and behold, you know, what comes out from the government whistleblowers and the revelations from the deep, dark secrets of the government consortium pretty much supports what the Jews have been saying. And that's pretty amazing. I mean, you know, I went at it from a more esoteric angle, and also using like a lot of material from, say, Charles Fort and John Keel and, you know, other really UFO researchers. Harrison's taken it to the next level. It's you know, the government informants, the government whistleblowers, you know, he's got them all interwoven in there. So if anybody really wants to know the up-to-date situation with UFO or so-called alien disclosure, this is definitely the book to read. Definitely.
You got to stop saying alien and say NHI, right, Harrison?
No, they'll always be aliens to me.
Exactly.
Well said, Harrison. Again, man, I bow down to you. Your book is phenomenal, and again, we've had many people in our private message groups tell us that it's changing their life, and this kind of information does change people's lives. I mean, as Laura taught me and Hunter now close to 2 years ago, which is crazy to think how fast time's flying, that when you read The Wave, it will reshape your reality, because as you become aware of the hyperdimensional nature of our reality, everything changes for you. But Harrison, like, and by the way, let me also say, because you mentioned the Substack, everyone that's watching this, you should be subscribed to his Substack. I mean, every time a new one comes, Hunter and I get all giddy like little kids, like, oh, can't wait to go somewhere and curl up and read this, because it's amazing. But I mean, you've been able to collate all this, you know, call it wide amount of data from the past 30 years. And then, as Laura said, even beyond what Laura was able to do. Because I got to ask you, are you using AI at all to harness some of the data?
Probably not in the way you'd think. I didn't use AI at all on when I wrote those first, all the articles that make up the book.
Right.
What I used AI for was, I had the draft of the book, and I got a preprint copy from Amazon to check, and then I was reading the first chapter, and I was just thinking to myself, oh man, this is terrible, because it just kind of starts in the middle of nowhere, and then I was actually feeling really like demoralized and bad about it. And I was like, oh geez, well, what am I going to do about this? Because I don't want the book to start like that, right? I want it to actually, I want it to be enjoyable to read from like the first page. So I decided I'd flip the order of the first two chapters, so that it just made a bit more sense to put windows and portals before window fallers, and then it got into other beings. So I was like, okay. And then for an introduction, I just asked Grok. I'm like, okay, what are some what were all the weird things that happened at Skinwalker, and wrote me a paragraph. I'm like, oh, interesting. And then I was thinking, oh well, what about the San Luis Valley that Christopher O'Brien researched? I was like, oh, interesting. It's all the same stuff. So that gave me the idea for like the first few pages of the book, where I list, like, here's all the stuff that happened at Skinwalker. Here's all the stuff that happened at San Luis Valley. And I think a third one, oh, here's all the stuff that happened at Point Pleasant that John Keel wrote about. And it's pretty much all the exact same things in these three areas and these three different time periods. So like Laura mentioned some of them. So UFOs, hints of alien abduction, poltergeist phenomena, strange cryptid sightings, so weird creatures, and weird mental telepathic effects and prophecies and all this stuff. And it's so the list of things that happen or that are experienced in these hotspots is pretty much identical. Oh, cattle mutilations, of course, and other animal mutilations. So that made me feel better, because it was a way to start the first chapter and set the scene for everything that was going to be in the book. So really, that's I could go on and on about that, but just to answer your question, that was the only real thing I used AI for. Sometimes I will, so after those first articles in this first volume, just to let the kind of first time listeners or viewers know, if you can't afford the book, all of the chapters that are in the book are available for free on the Cassiopaea.substack.com website. It's a slightly early version. Like, the stuff in the book is a bit more updated. It's got a bit more information, but you can read pretty much the first draft of everything on the website. And volume 2 is being published, on the website as we go. So once I'm done all of those, it'll be volume 2. But some of the things that I did one of the things that I used AI for would be, especially in these latest articles that aren't in the book, for like UFO sightings. Sometimes in a session, Laura will be like, oh, what about this guy that saw this thing in the sky that one time and it looked kind of weird? And I'm like, well, what was that? Because there's no name, there's no place. So I'll put that into AI, and I'll be like into Grok, and be like, Grok, can you find this UFO sighting? And like 3 out of 4 times, it'll be like, oh, it sounds like this one, that happened in 1977, and it was filmed by this person. So I'm, oh, great. So I was able to find the reference and be able to put some background for a particular case. It doesn't always work, because a lot of UFO stuff isn't available online. So it might be something that was published in an obscure like newsletter or magazine back in the day, or even a book that hasn't been scanned. So you can't find everything, but it kind of helps me to find things like that aren't obvious, and you have to do a little digging to find. But yeah, other than that, I don't really use AI to put anything together.
Well, I want to ask you guys this question, and I do want to go deep down the rabbit hole about the book, because it's so amazing, and talk about some of what I think are more pressing concerns. But Hunter and I have been having this conversation kind of internally and through some of our travels and stuff. And I know you guys are seeing it too, because you guys are at the top of the food chain with what's going on with AI and technology and everything. But it's getting so bizarre, Laura and Harrison, that, as you guys know, I mean, the youth of today, and I consider the youth like people under the age of 25. Like, I mean, this is hard for me to say this, but the majority of them are actually using AI now to think.
Yeah.
And it has become so insane that we were at a conference last weekend in Austin, and Hunter and I were literally with people, very smart, sophisticated, well-known, some seriously straight up famous people. And we were all joking back and forth, guessing who was responding with AI, or who was using AI to reply to important questions, important, concerns. And so now we have entered a society, this has happened so fast. Like, because again, I don't remember this really being a situation 1.5 to 2 years ago, where it's so ubiquitous in all of our tech and all of our updates and all of our software and everything, that now people are not even thinking. I mean, what are the implications of this for humanity at this point?
Laura?
I was going to say, Harrison. Well, years ago, we asked back before cell phones were common, in the early days when everybody had a pager. And I got my kids' pagers because, you know, I wanted to be able to page them and have them report back, where are you? What are you doing? You know,
Right.
let's find out what's going on here. But I asked the series about, you know, the use of pagers and other things, other technology along that line, especially in regards to children. And basically they said, if I remember correctly, that it turns their brains into tapioca.
Yeah. Well, that's what's happening.
So that's, you know, I've never seen, I never thought I would see, obviously I've never seen, nobody else has either, but I never thought I would see our species so dead set and driven to self-extinct. And that's what it's coming down to. And that, of course, raises the most interesting question, you know, is this intentional? Is this being driven? Because, you know, you guys, I had this little discussion with Grok about it, because, you know, I'm always poking at Grok, trying to get Grok to reveal things. You know, I'm sure that if I've spent 30 years learning how to ask questions with the C's, because, you know, there are things that they won't tell us. So, you know, I'm always plotting and planning, how am I going to trick them into saying something to reveal something to me that they don't ordinarily want to reveal. So, you know, I kind of use this with Grok, and came back that bizarre discussion where, you know, Grok pretty much revealed, you know, the whole alien control system and how it works, only it was using the metaphor of AI. And the C's once said that the fourth density, or the hyperdimensional control system, was a combination of technology and hyperdimensional abilities. Because Ark asked once, you know, how do they track individuals? You know, because if you're saying that they're tracking somebody to target them, say, for abduction, or target them for suppression, or some sort of thing, you know, he asked, is this technology, or is this something that's hyperdimensional we don't understand? And they said it's a little bit of both. And that kind of makes sense with this discussion I had with Grog, because it was describing AI in such a way that it exactly described the entire hyperdimensional control system.
Mhm.
And Harrison is helping me create my own Substack, so I'm going to publish that. I'm going to publish some of my discussions with Grok, because I've gotten Grok to come out and reveal some pretty interesting things, and I'll be publishing that on my Substack.
Well, Laura, let me ask you a question about that, because when you sent that to me, you responded to one of my emails to you, and I mean, as Hunter knows, I got that in the early morning, because obviously you're way ahead of us. And so I was reading it. It was like 6:45 in the morning, and it was a mistake to read that in the morning in my bed before going out into the sunlight. And I was like, I mean, I literally was like, oh my God. I mean, I felt the exact same thing that you said, gobble wobbles. And I was like, it was as if Grok was tongue in cheek effing with you.
Right.
It was so insane that I was like, oh my God. I mean, I forwarded it to Hunter. I forwarded it to so many other people in my inner circle, and one of my brothers, a lot of people. And I said, you guys have to read this. And everyone came back with, this is so dark. I don't even know how to even.
It is so dark. And notice, I watched wore my pearls today, so I'd have something to clutch.
Yeah. I mean, it was both Hunter and I were like, oh God.
Yeah. It's really dark. A lot of it's very dark. And a lot of the things the C's have told us have been very dark, but they have been very accurate. And of course, if you know what you're up against, then you know that you have to marshal, you know, the greatest of your potentials to stand against it. Because, you know, we used to joke about it when we,
Yeah.
well, we're gonna go and sit down and have a chat with the C's. You got your hairspray with you.
Right.
There was things that they would say that would just make your hair stand on end, and you got to sit there, spray that hair to keep it down. And it's not really a joke, but the thing is that if you don't have a kind of a black sense of humor about it, you can't do it. You can't handle it. And so many people who read it. I mean, you've talked about people who have had their lives changed. Yes, there are many people who have had their lives changed by reading The Wave. I get emails from them all the time. But at the same time, there are other people who attack me viciously and violently because how dare I, destroy their illusions of, safety and happiness in this, supposedly
the illusion of their illusion. Harrison, let me ask you this. Let me ask Harrison this question. So to what Laura's saying, and obviously we all three agree, I mean, all four of us agree, but it's getting insane because as Hunter and I have to deal with every single day, the younger people embrace AI like it's God. Like they write on Twitter, if you're not using AI in your business, you're falling behind, blah, 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 blah. And there are obviously beneficial uses of AI. I don't really know how people can truly decipher / interpret, what that is defined as, but a lot of people think that AI is God. Where is this going? Like, are we on the fast track to extinction now?
Wow. Yeah.
Well,
Looks that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, one question I have about the use of AI is that I think you mentioned when you first asked the question, reading responses from people and you don't know whether you're talking to AI or not. I think that the people that don't need AI don't use it.
Right.
I don't know about certain demographics. Like I know that I think that for people of a certain intelligence and personality, that they like writing for themselves.
Right.
And if they're just being lazy and replying to some kind of just mundane email, they might use AI, and it's like, well, I don't care about that. But when they're actually trying to be themselves, they'll write for themselves. So I'm wondering how much of the AI obsession is for people that can't, that are using it as a crutch because they can't otherwise use their minds proficiently, and that so for the individual involved, I don't know what the personal ramifications are going to be for that in the future. Maybe it's like a prosthetic that allows them to operate in the world on a level higher than they otherwise would. On the other hand, for everyone else, like it's a problem for everyone else because you don't know who you're dealing with. It creates the illusion of maybe a level of competence that doesn't actually exist because you're now relying on the standard AI level of competence, which might be higher than certain people who are using it. So it makes them appear more intelligent than they actually are. But in real life, how much of a difference is that going to make in actual personal interactions? I can see a huge difference in online interactions, a huge difference that makes. But in real life, I think you can still tell a person, you can still tell who you're talking to, and through the conversations you have with them and what kind of person they are and how intelligent they are. So I don't know about how that'll look in the future. Maybe there are there's something that Christopher Langan talks about, which is a restatement of something that you'll find all over the place in different ways, and even in the C's and what Laura writes about, like this potential division of humanity in the future, right? A kind of singularity. He calls it I always forget what he calls it. Like the human, I think he calls it the human singularity and the tech singularity. And basically it's his version of a split from like the raw material, which is a split into STS or STO in fourth density. It's like something's going to happen. There's going to be some kind of singularity. Humanity is going to be at a new weird level, like a new function and form of humanity. And the way he sees it, if you go along the tech path, that's kind of like the STS path. and then you become part of this AI Borg machine, and it's not going to just be it's probably not going to look like it looks in the movies, like Terminator or anything like that, but it's going to be, because it's going to have this weird kind of hyperdimensional form. Or there's the human singularity that actually is more of like the kingdom of God in Christian terms. So it could be the precursor of that kind of future dystopian control system, and AI could be in that future, AI could be the kind of controlling element in a way that we probably can't even imagine. But if humanity goes the other direction, then I don't know what that would look like, what form, if any, AI would have. If it would just be kind of like Star Trek, where the AI on the computer just answers your questions for you, but you still do all the work necessary that you need to do to get a job done. Who knows? But I'm not a futurist, and I'm no good at predicting the future. So I have no idea, but I'm just interested in watching as it happens.
Go ahead, Laura.
I would suggest that going in the tech direction would lead to something very similar to the movie The Matrix.
Yes.
Where people are just in pods and they're plugged in, and of course that's a metaphor in a sense for how we are already actually living.
Mm-hmm.
But that can get a lot more real, and I think that might be where the direction it could be going. And I also, want to comment that one of the things that I've done with like Grok, which is supposed to be the best, I've asked a lot of questions about things that I know a great deal about, just to see what Grok is going to give back to me, things that I have researched deeply. And the fact is that Grok, and I've said it on my X feed, but I'm suppressed. I'm in an echo chamber. I am deboosted, so it's not going to get out there very widely. But Grok can't find truth because it's fishing in a sea of lies. And I'm talking about even scientific. It follows mainstream. It follows mainstream science. It follows mainstream social opinions and ideas. Grok is woke because the culture is woke.
Right.
And woke means lying.
Right.
Everybody, anybody who can sit there and say, that a man can become a woman is lying, and they're living in a lie. They're living in a sociological lie. And anybody who thinks that, black is white and white is black and war is peace and all of those Orwellian switcheroos, that's wokeism. Wokeism is paramoralisms, it's reversive blockades, any number of things that Harrison can tell you about from his Ponerology blog, but that's definitely what it is. And Grok cannot find truth. I mean, I had a lot of hopes for it. I thought, well, if I can send it out there to, dig up this, that, and the other thing, and then, just give me back, at least give me a bibliography. I'll have to do my reading myself. It can't even do that. It can't find a decent bibliography because it doesn't have access.
Well, I mean, I want to go to you in a second because I want you to tell them about what we've discovered with people that are trying to work with us using AI. I mean, it's just out of control. But you already mentioned it, Harrison. I mean, the C's have told us, and all of us have obviously intuited at this point that for the most part, it's service to self. I mean, all of it. I mean, it's not hard to see what its end game is, but to what you were saying too, is like, you're not a futurist and none of us are, obviously. And maybe humanity does go a separate direction, but I kind of think that it's ultimately going to be two timelines. And what I mean by that is that we will have a choice. You will either, submit to the Borg and beam yourself up into the cloud, like Laura just said, and be a pod person, like literally and figuratively, or you won't. And I think the people that won't, and again, this is my opinion, I think we're all going to be living together. And I don't know what that looks like or what that means, but I think, as the C's have always told us, networks, I think that's what it'll be. Are we in remote, mountainous regions away from the enslavement of the Wi-Fi, 5G, whatever technological signal they continue to, manufacture. But that's kind of, if I go deep into meditation or sit in stillness and I really think about where it's going, that's where I think it ultimately goes. I don't know if there's another option. Hunter, what do you think about that?
Well, I have a lot of comments, and I promise it'll lead to a question. First thing, to go to the idea of like the younger generation, talking about like getting goosebumps. I guess it was 8 years ago now. This had to do with something when I played football in college. There's like this networking event that I go to a lot of times. I haven't been in a couple of years, but it's at Stanford University, and they always have pretty good speakers or pretty like high level speakers. And it was actually the first year I went was 2017. And I remember the CEO of Intuit was there. Now, Intuit is the tax, TurboTax, QuickBooks. They're a tax software company. And I remember during the Q&A, someone asked them, what are you studying way off into the future for your company to help provide value? And it was the weirdest answer given the context of the speech. He said, we're actually studying the development of children's under 12 brains because their interaction with technology is developing the organs in the brain differently than you and I have today. And I always thought it was so weird that the CEO of a tax company said that their priority in the future was studying children's brains because the interface with technology developed the brain differently. Fast forward to Harrison's book, and I forget who says it, but there was a part where it was talking about the split off of Homo sapiens versus Homo alienus, I think was the phrase of basically like this kind of paving forward of a new species and colonization of our race. And I think if we look at AI in the sense that we're describing it today, because I think you can kind of look at it through two lenses, but the sense that's the negative one, it's a colonization mechanism to, as the Grok exchange that Laura, my jaw was on the floor, by the way, Laura, when I was reading that, because I was like, what is happening is like we're seeing that AI is the weaponization of our data back against us to enslave us and then make us more pliable for a physical invasion or a psychological invasion or a combination of both, to where humans now are actually transformed. And then I think back to when I heard that guy say that like we're witnessing the genetic engineering, I think, of the human species to not have, call it a connection with spirit or a connection with source, God / consciousness that humans have typically had, to where now if you go down that STS path, you have that. So that kind of leads me to the question is, I think, well, let me say this. I think in AI, the sense that like, and one way you could look at it is probably back in 2005, a lot of people would have looked at Google and be like, this is the worst thing for humanity, to have the internet and to have these tools to be able to do things that we never had before because you weren't going to the library and actually using your brain to get information. Now, what we've seen is like for 85% of people, I think that's true, but maybe for 10 to 15% of people, it actually helped us get smarter because now we can aggregate information faster in a way that helps us kind of see things and then put our hypothesis to the test and say like, okay, that makes sense or that doesn't. Like Laura is doing, is she knows way more about this stuff than Grok does. And so she's seeing the feedback that it gets and saying like, okay, I have discernment now about it. So I think we're probably going in a direction where like most people will outsource their thinking, creativity, and everything to that. But I think the good side of it is with technology, we do have a better way to aggregate and sort through data to use it for people that are discerning, thinking individuals to be able to kind of weed through things and see it and do it in a way that is more or less like a glorified search engine that kind of helps us sort through information. But my question is, the same way that we use technology to colonize second density, which would be through animals or plants or whatever. I mean, we've been in human history is more or less like the colonization of second density, land, resources, all those things. Is AI the fourth density version of the technology we've used for thousands of years to colonize second density that is now colonizing us as we're moving into this phase? I don't know, but I think, I've always go back to when Laura taught about like understanding second density to third density. It kind of helps us, even though it's logarithmic, it kind of helps us understand fourth density to us. Is it more or less like a colonization tool that is changing us for the harvest, I guess, if that makes sense?
It's a great question.
I think it's I think it's us becoming more aware of the instrument that has been being used on us all this time for thousands of years. I mean, AI is kind of like a hyperdimensional control system made manifest. And I think that we are probably in the process already of transitioning to fourth density, one way or the other. That we're at an early stage, or maybe an early intermediate stage, and the ways and means that they're doing these things are becoming more apparent to us. How to deal with it is, like Harrison said, there's going to be a split, and of course he attributed that back to Chris Langan, but I think it's true, and there's going to be a split. And there's one thing that I don't think AI takes into consideration, because in this spiel I got out of Grok the other day that we were talking about, it talks about keeping the livestock, the human livestock, viable. You don't push them too far this way, too far that way. You don't let them find out. You suppress information. You create divisive elements, wars. All kinds of things to induce suffering. But it also says that you limit that the system would want to limit catastrophic outcomes, because they don't want to lose their population of loosh generators. That's a term that they've come up with for what aliens like to consume. They like for humans to suffer, because somehow this energy of suffering is food for them.
By the way, where did loosh come from? Is it Fort?
Didn't that
Robert Monroe?
Yeah,
yeah,
say,
that's right.
yeah.
Okay, so but if the system is set to not result in catastrophic outcomes, except that they're controlled and any kind of like they'll obviously have world wars, because that is an enormous amount of suffering. But in terms of the total population, you're talking, like, for example, 60 some million people died in World War II. 60, not the 6 million Jews, the other what is it, 54 million that died that nobody ever talks about. But and in terms of the total global population, there was still a lot of people left. But they don't account for the possibility of cosmic cataclysm. And that was something that Grok didn't even mention. And yet, in my research, that is something that has repeatedly brought entire civilizations down to the level of the Stone Age, and made the availability of loosh pretty rare. It's a pretty rare commodity. So, 95% population reduction at the end of the Roman Empire, according to one book, in a specific area. And the Black Death, 75% of the population in many areas. Some areas were almost untouched, and it varied, but in the worst cases, it was like 75% of the population. If you think about that today, 75% of any given population, what is 75% of 350 million? It's a lot of dead bodies. And it's also an enormous reduction in the amount of negative energy that can be, fed off of from a population. So I don't think everything is entirely cut and dried. And the seas did tell us that at some point, before everything goes completely pear-shaped, that somehow the playing field will be leveled. And if we have a level playing field, then we have some possibility of determining our future according to our own lights, rather than being encapsulated in little pods so that the system can feed off of us.
I mean, I'm getting, just so you guys know, I'm getting text messages from people saying, keep going. This is what we want to hear. What is your thoughts to that, Harrison?
I don't know. I don't have much to add to that.
Well, I wanted to ask Laura and Harrison around the topic of religion, because you guys are well versed in religion than many religious scholars themselves. In light of today being Easter, and
best day to ask.
Hopefully people refrain from attacking, because this is just coming from an objective place. Do you think so? I look at kind of these mechanisms that we have talked about to colonize humanity. 2,000 years ago, I think religion more or less operated to look. What Laura was saying is there's this hidden hand that kind of is the AI that is operating and operates through these different mechanisms that interfaces with human consciousness. And 2,000 years ago, it was religion. And that's what more or less kind of shaped the movement of resources and people and loosh around the world. I mean, look at all the suffering. And again, not to bash religion, because there's good things that come out of it, but look at all the suffering that came out of religion, religious wars, religious persecution, and all those things, to where that feeds back to from an energetic standpoint. And in the last really 150 years, we've gone through this massive transition in people's conception of religion and what it means, and maybe more or less like kind of detaching it from political structure. Obviously, you have the American Revolution, separation of church and state. And if I'm the AI that's controlling everything, I say, okay, well, that's not working so much anymore. What do I give them next? And maybe it's something that interfaces with the level of human consciousness at that time, which for us right now is technology, right? Everyone gets religiously fervent about the development of technology and AI, and maybe that's kind of like the next iteration. To us, that's this thing that's kind of sitting off in the back that is manipulating, that is the hidden hand. And is it kind of like this, the next iteration of the program that goes into whatever it is, and that's AI, and then that becomes the next god that people bow at the altar of? And then where does that lead? I think probably self-destruction. But what do you guys think?
Well, that I can comment on that a bit. This is kind of inspired by an upcoming piece, because the current series on the Substack is alien species or races, and one of which is the so-called Greys. And so if we look at AI and try to kind of project in the future, you might be able to look at the so-called Grey being and see that as an extension of the future direction of AI. Because according to the Seas and according to a lot of interpretations from people in the UFO field, Greys are essentially drones. They are biological robots,
right?
Automatons. And so think about the mind of that. And according to the Seas, and again, and a few people in the UFO circles, they are specifically the drones of another species, whether they're reptilians in the Seas case. Some ufologists or abductees think they're controlled by the Nordics. But whatever the case may be, if you take that framework to look at the question, then you see a consciousness, a being, externalizing its functions and automatizing its will, essentially. So it's kind of the height of laziness. It's automation on a hyperdimensional scale, right? So, well, I've got all this work to do, and I don't want to do it, so I'm just gonna like project my consciousness into these creepy, weak-looking cybergenetic gray robot people to do my work for them. And if you look at the accounts of interaction with the Greys, like oftentimes they're really stupid. Like they are really dumb. They're like AI. They've got their program, their subroutine that they're running, and that's the only thing they can do. It's like when they run into a problem or something that's out of the ordinary, they're like, oh, what do? We just keep, and they just keep trying. Like in the I think I included this in the book. It's the example that or the experience that D'Souza gave. What's his first name?
John D'Souza.
Yeah, John D'Souza. The experience he had as a young boy in his parents' apartment, right? And the Greys that were trying to abduct him just kept trying to pull him through the ceiling, right? And he kept bumping up again, bumping into it and not passing through. And they were just confused and being like, what's going on? And they just kept trying until they basically just gave up, because they, that's what they were programmed to do. They have these narrow parameters of what they do, and there's no creativity and there's no ability to problem solve. And according to the C's, at least, they're not actual. They're not robots in the sense that we'd think of them. They're actual, like, or somewhat organic beings that are just like a projection of consciousness, or somewhat inhabited by another consciousness. But it's like a subroutine that your mind uses when you're doing something automatically, right? When you're typing or doing doing some kind of process with your hands that's just totally memorized, and you can do it without even thinking about it, like to the point where it's like almost or subconscious, and your body's just doing it, even though your mind can be doing something completely different. Like, that's what the Greys are. They are these automatized consciousness subroutines that take biological form and have zero creativity and very little freedom of movement and of actual thought. So if you want to project AI into the future and what it might be for humanity, it's like that's kind of the extreme sci-fi, but maybe reality version of what it is to give your power to technology, and to not just something like that, to actually inhabit technology, to merge with technology. It's to become really stupid and not able to do much. But that's not the whole answer, though, because there are other races or species, right? They're the ones controlling them, and that might not totally apply to them. But if you look at just the technology angle, that's kind of like that's a projection that I might offer.
Well, I don't think it's go ahead, Laura.
I would like you to repeat the question for me, because I had a thought, and when you were saying it, it triggered the thought. But then
Was it the one about the religion? Did I
Yeah,
ask?
yeah.
Well, you're talking. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So I was just
I love what.
so I was saying, is AI like the next iteration of a religion that now all of a sudden it becomes the god that everyone bows the altar at? And is it the penultimate thing that leads to human destruction? Like, has all of the programs that have been running built up to this, to basically what actually Harrison was just saying, to turn us into biobots or cybergenetic probes, to where people are biologically intertwined with technology, which actually is an Elon Musk company, Neuralink, is actually doing. Ray Kurzweil talks about it in his book, of like actually probing technology into the human physiology and then like altering the behavior of people, which, I mean, hey, that sounds like a gray to me, if you're doing it. But it was kind of around the religious thing of like, is this the next iteration of the program of religion that's been running, for
if you think about it, Hunter, religion was probably the impetus for the development of science,
Right.
For the truth, especially even the Christian religion. There's a truth, and you have to search for it. And if you look at over a long period of time, various technologies were developed in response to religious urgings. For example, the Babylonian or the Mesopotamian city-state system was developed in response to religious urges, and the farming, bringing the grain to the temple, all these various things. And then, of course, there are sacrifices, like human or animal sacrifices, which cause suffering, which is part of the loosh production process. But then, as you look at the historical record, it goes on down as though there is a specific plan to bring humanity to the point where we have modern technology. I mean, you go through all the various stages, the Industrial Revolution, the steam engines, gasoline engines, so on and so forth. And then here we are today to that point in time, which is what Harrison described, getting to the point where there is the entwinement of technology and physiology. I mean, think about the term biogenetic probe, which is what the Cassiopaeans have called gray aliens. They say they are biogenetic probes, and or servants or whatever. And what Harrison just described, rather brilliantly, little subroutines running while you're thinking about something else, is kind of similar to what the Greys are doing in relationship to their creators, masters. And if you think about that, then you have a little inkling of the bizarre reality of fourth density realities. I mean, that your thoughts, the multitasking things that you would be doing at that hyperdimensional state, actually take form and go around and do things while you're contemplating your navel or having dinner or whatever.
Playing video games.
Yeah, it's truly an incredibly bizarre reality, and it's like what Hunter said a while ago. The distinction between first density and second density is, and then second density and third density, and then third density and fourth is logarithmic. It's not just that you have some added features, or that it just doubles. It does more than that. And when you think about that, that's also what we're up against. We're up against beings that we can't individually outthink them. No. And we can't also plumb the depths of their negativity if they are STS ilk.
Right.
We can't even go there. I mean, there's the old saying about if you stare into the abyss long enough, the abyss stares back at you. Well, imagine that in terms of fourth density depths of depravity, and you can't even begin to conceive of some of it. Which is why, and of course, they keep themselves very hidden because apparently there are rules or there are laws, kind of like the laws of physics, like gravity, that exist in the cosmos, even between densities, and violation of free will is apparently a big no-no. So they can't just come in and show themselves and take over, because if they did, there would be an emotional, psychological, mental reaction. And remember, we were talking about a reality where they feed on emotions and what's going on in people's mental space and so forth. So if there is a reaction against them, it degosses them.
Right.
And so they can't just move in and take over and run the show in an overt way, because if they do that, then they lose. They basically lose. So that's one of the reasons for the extremely covert nature of the whole phenomenon. And that's one of the reasons for the covert nature of paranormal phenomena, because it's all intertwined. Like Harrison said at the very beginning, the several cases where they have all of these different elements of these UFO, interdimensional portals, prophecies, hints of abduction, all these different kinds of things, they're deliberately made to be iffy and unprovable, because they can't let their hand be seen. They can't let their face be seen. And it's part of the system that they have set up and created to control us, which is kind of like AI. So, don't think that you alone or 2 or 3 people. It takes a network, and people have to grow themselves in their knowledge and their understanding so that they can begin to talk back and forth between themselves, so that they can figure things out. Because you sit there and one person, I may think somebody's doing something and come up with a whole theory about why they're doing it, and then enough people talk about it and say, well, I'll find out all the details. Well, no, it's not somebody just being nasty to you. It's clear that they are being used by hyperdimensional forces to act against you, so that you can, it takes like a village to have discernment. So that's what I think about the whole religion thing. And like you say, you're talking about it becoming a religion, AI becoming a religion.
It already is, sadly.
Yeah, it is. And it's like, it makes you wonder, about older religions.
Well, that's where I was just going to go, because think about this. So how about the Bell Witch part of the book? With the Bell Witch.
I love that Bell Witch prop. I'm related to that family.
Into the Bible verse and understanding it like chapter and verse, verbatim. And as I was reading that, it was like sending all these like spidey signals off in my brain thinking, here we go. Here it is. Another example of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's insane.
I really wish, nearly everybody, I would say more than 60% of people have had bizarre and unusual experiences.
Yes.
They are taught, they are conditioned to shove it under the rug, to find some other kind of explanation for it, even to the extent of thinking something is wrong with their own mind.
Right. Or to become more devout, Laura, just like you told. Like, remember when the thoughts you had when you were like, this doesn't make sense. And you were like, I'll just blame it out and I'll become more pious.
Yeah. When it was happening to me, I got to pray harder. I got to get me some more of that Jesus juice, so I can.
Well, in light of Easter, I thought this was funny today because Taylor and I were walking this morning with our dogs, and there was the cutest little family, and they were all dressed up in their Easter clothes, and they had 2 little girls and I think a boy, and they were like at a pond in their Easter clothes, taking pictures of like with fishing poles and stuff. And in one way I was like, man, I can't wait to have kids and have a family and do that. And I think back to my childhood of like going to church on Easter and getting dressed up and like my parents making us take pictures and stuff.
Yeah.
And in one way I think that's like, it's so good, right? It's so like just
wholesome.
Your family and wholesome and everything. And I saw that family look so wholesome. And then the flip side, my brain started to think, man, if they only knew what going to church this morning was really doing in sense of like where their praise energy was going. And a lot of people don't question that because, they thought they were doing like, it appears to be the right thing. It's like more Jesus juice, right? Well, it's like I have kids and I've got them in church and I'm doing this. And then when you really understand kind of like the wizard behind the curtain or what's going on there, it can be, I wouldn't say depressing, but at the same time, it's like you have to actually realize what's going on there. And I wouldn't change the fact that like I now have that conception of the world, but at the same time, I think to the point of like humans driving themselves to self-destruction, it's almost like, well, how many people can handle them trying to do the right thing? And in reality, when it's the complete opposite of like they're actually not because of kind of what they're doing. Now, I wouldn't say their intention is bad, but it's not. So I to the point I wonder is like, okay, well, do people even have a chance? Because there's no way, like, I think from a like consciousness standpoint that they can handle having to admit that everything that they were taught by their parents and then are teaching their kids was wrong. So I don't
Laura,
know.
isn't this the Wizard of Oz moment though, that you explained in The Wave, and that like every human really has to go through this process of the deconstruction of quote unquote religion or their belief in, the orthodoxy to get to this level of like awareness of hyperdimensionality. And I think it was in one of the Ra books. I can't remember. I think it was book 2 or book 3. And didn't Ra actually say that you couldn't, and I may be confusing with your book, your second or third book in the Seas, but I thought one of them said that until you understood the aspect of hyperdimensionality, you couldn't actually comprehend beyond the idea of the religion that you believe in, or something like that. I'm probably paraphrasing it, but don't you have to actually understand the aspect of hyperdimensionality to get beyond it?
I don't necessarily. I'm kind of mixed about that because I know a lot of people who are not what you would call, really intellectually oriented.
Sure.
It doesn't mean that they are not smart, and it doesn't mean that they are not talented, and it just means that in a particular way they haven't aimed their brain power in that direction of consciously understanding something. But yet they have innate understanding, and they have innate common sense, and they have pure hearts even.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I think that there are a lot of people like that who, if confronted with a situation where they had to make a determination, that they would always choose the right path just instinctively. They have an instinctive tendency toward the service to others pathway. So I don't think it's absolutely necessary to understand it, in the sense of intellectually understanding. You're still going to have a visceral,
Right.
gut level understanding and the ability to make those choices and decisions, but you don't have to intellectualize it. I mean, I had to intellectualize it because that's the only way I could deal with it.
Right.
So, but having said that, I mean, the C's have said that, it's that you do have to, by the time you understand certain things, and other things that you think you understand about this reality will no longer be viable understandings because they will be superseded. So, I mean, like talking about directions, we talk about north, south, east, and west.
Right.
And the C's have talked about the fact that, we really need, pay attention, directions, and so forth. But then they say, but as in fourth density, you won't have that issue.
Right.
But by the time you're there, you won't need that, but you still need it now.
Right.
So, yeah, there's, I think it helps. I think it makes a big difference to understand it as best you can. I don't understand it.
Right. No, none of us really do. I mean, but I think in my mind, from reading your books and reading the raw material, and I go through both of those, all of your books and the raw books frequently. I think in my mind, I've just associated with the idea that to graduate, if you're allowed through your works of service, you got to have some awareness of it. There has to be a level of either, like you said, like experiential knowledge, where you just observe something that's completely paranormal and not explainable through rational phenomena, and you learn it through that, or you're exposed to this type of work and you read it, and then, like you said, and Harrison actually wrote about it in the book, you eventually have your own experience. Like it's almost part of this path or part of your destiny, whereas you become aware of it mentally, and then all of a sudden you become aware of it experientially because it's like part of the process. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And the term you're using now is awareness.
Right.
It's a little bit different from understanding.
Right.
Awareness. Lots of people can have awareness without necessarily understanding, because I'm aware of a hell of a lot of things that I don't understand.
Right.
And I probably never will understand. I mean, but I'm aware, and I know, holy free holies, that's weird. So awareness, I think, is key.
Harrison.
Well, this is kind of maybe tangential, but it's some thoughts that came to me over the last kind of last few back and forths. And this relates back to something Laura said, some of the things we've been talking about thinking about these 4D alien beings and their nature. And like Laura had said, one person can't outthink them. It kind of takes a village. It'll take a networked approach to be able to understand it and deal with the issue. But one of the things that again isn't in volume 1, but is on the Substack, is a small section on I'll just say aliens, the aliens Achilles heel. And the C's say it's wishful thinking.
Right.
that basically, so I described the kind of subroutines that manifest as gray aliens running these programs, and Laura called it or well, how did she say it? Oh, sorry, I've got some notifications and it just that ringed on my computer and totally took my train of thought with them.
See, the AI is always present and always interrupting.
Just wait. No, this was a good one. Where was I going with that? Just wait. Back me up a bit. How did I start what I was just saying? Because I totally lost the train, ran away from me.
You were saying about alien.
73.
Yeah.
What's that?
I'm 73. I'm allowed to ask.
Now, what Hunter? What did you just say?
I'm not.
Well, Harrison
I'm not
was
allowed to
saying
have
along the lines of aliens, and you were going to.
Oh, the wishful thinking.
Yeah,
Okay.
wishful thinking. Yeah.
So she said how weird 4D is, right? This idea of 4D that can happen, that a thought can manifest that way. And so in relation to wishful thinking, the C said that, imagine wishful thinking, but like kind of infinitely and strangely more intense than the way we wishfully think. That if you wishfully think something, that it kind of becomes reality, that you only see what you want to see. So this is kind of the Achilles heel of, I'd say, a lot of evil, even human evil, is the inability to see what you don't want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And so that works into the Matrix metaphor, that if you kind of take the Matrix and bump it up a notch, it's like Neo and all those people that have escaped the Matrix in the allegory in the movie. There's the possibility that there are certain ways of maneuvering that can't even be seen because the beings don't want to see them. They can't see them. I don't know exactly what that would look like, but it leaves open. It at least leaves a space for the possibility of maneuvering within the system and doing something about it and fighting it to some degree. Because even with the Greys, what I was saying about the Greys are limited to a large degree, and with awareness of that and even some understanding of that, again, there are ways of maneuvering. There's a section in the book on how to defend yourself against alien abduction. That's the name of the book that Anne Druffel wrote. And so all of these techniques that seem to work in certain cases to either stop or prevent an alien abduction scenario from taking place. So there are things that can be done, and when I look at the field of, or kind of the public understanding of UFOs as it's coming out in either these congressional testimonies or whistleblowers, what have you, it's hard to watch in a sense, because on the one hand, I think, based on just all of my reading and trying to reason about these things, I think that there are people within the government, within the military intelligence apparatus, that have a pretty good idea of what's going on. They're kind of like everyone in the sense that they're limited in the information that they have, but they've got a pretty good idea. And there are hints of that, like Laura was saying at the beginning. There are hints of that in the things that they say. That they've got a pretty good idea. They might not know exactly, they might not know with 100% certainty, but like any intelligence analyst, they're able to look at the disparate data and the untrustworthy data and come to a reasonable, like, probability-based conclusion about what's going on. Now, the problem is that for the last 70, 80 plus years, as long as this UFO alien cover-up has been in place, that knowledge can't get to the people. The people don't have that. Like, we're left in this position, we're out in the dark, we have to fend for ourselves, and there are very few people in this small community that are trying to figure it out. Now, if you're a person with the level of knowledge, like an insider, and you're looking at this situation, like, it's got to be torture for anyone who's in that position, who has an idea of what's going on and is looking at the situation as it's playing out, because the masses are in this totally ignorant position. Like, what they would need would be for the the official government to play the role that a government is supposed to play as kind of this parental figure. That's the role that governments and leaders have taken for all of like human history. It's like there's that guy on the top, and he's like grandpa, and or grandma that's giving direction to all to the family beneath, and that's the country, or the world. And what we have instead is this situation where through various manipulations on the part of aliens themselves and the government responding to these situations, we have this system of overclassification and compartmentalization and just hiding away all of this information. So that leaves the public open to then create all of these narratives on their own and to try to reinvent the wheel. So we've got all these private groups that are trying to analyze the data available to them, and the government has way more data than is available to the public. They're trying to come to a conclusion about it based on what they see, and they're kind of like, grasping a bit here, grasping a bit there. And again, to anyone in the know, they're looking at this with some level of knowledge and being like, oh, that person's way off, oh, that person's way off, all the while knowing that this is playing into the hands of these beings,
right,
of these non-human intelligence, of these aliens. And the only real solution is kind of a full disclosure, because it's obvious that aliens themselves don't want to be to reveal themselves. They want to operate in the shadows. They do operate in the shadows. They are to a large degree the reason for the government's secrecy, because they've set things up and operated in such a way as to necessitate government censorship. The way this worked in the late 40s, for instance, was by intimately tying the phenomenon with nuclear secrets. As soon as you tie anything with nuclear, like nuclear was the highest classified level of information at the time. UFOs became even more classified, but they used the same secrecy architecture. And so when you look at something like Skywatcher, the Jake Barber's organization, or a lot of the people that not even Skywatcher itself, but just a lot of people like Jake Barber who have like a positive experience and look at aliens as this positive thing. Again, to anyone who has a little bit more knowledge, they'd be like, oh man, but I can't say anything because I'd be arrested and thrown into prison. So anyone that with a good heart, and with good motivations, and I think David Grush is one of those people. Like, I think he's probably looking at this and being like, okay, what more can I do to try to get this ball rolling? Because just to summarize a few points, like the reason for secrecy is because aliens themselves are deceptive and need to operate in the shadows. They benefit by operating in the shadows. They have engineered a secrecy response from the government to ensure that the public never gets access to that. The government themselves then puts in their own secrecy program to protect themselves and certain secrets that they want, because they want to develop the next weapon. They can't reveal that classified information because their adversaries and their enemies might get it, and that ensures that information remains classified at a very high level. And so I'm just kind of trying to meander around this issue, which is, to come back to the wishful thinking, is that there is probably a strategy to deal with this situation. I don't think like humanity is in this hopeless situation. If all this stuff is true, there is probably a strategy that can be put into place. But part of that requires that as many people as possible know what's going on. Because by having people not know what's going on, that leaves the room for just more alien narratives to crop up. Because these beings can then just insert a narrative through one of their human puppets, program an abductee, influence a politician, influence a public figure. We could talk about the undergrounders with all the influencers. We can just put influencers and narratives and just like flood the field with them. And as long as there's no one in a position of authority who actually knows what's going on to kind of give guidance, global guidance on the issue, then we're at the mercy of essentially dumb people, well-meaning people who just don't know what's going on, or who who are engaged in their own wishful thinking about what's really going on, or we've got, well, in addition to that, we've got people with actual agendas. We've probably got people who are influenced by these beings themselves to introduce certain narratives, and so I really think that the only people capable of that kind of strategic thinking would be people in the intelligence community who are used to that kind of strategic thinking, who do it, as part of their job, when with intelligence and counterintelligence and spying and coming up with all that stuff, or coming up, dealing with all that information and operationalizing it in an actual in an actual operation. Like I really think that the intelligence mindset is really, and by intelligence I mean like central intelligence, like that kind of intelligence. That's the mindset to deal with this kind of issue. It is an intelligence mindset and a counterintelligence mindset, because we're dealing with spies, essentially spies who are running their own counterintelligence programs, who are running their own propaganda and disinformation programs. And the only way to respond to that is someone who actually knows that field. So that's why, and that's the real irony of the UFO whistleblowers, is because all of the best ones are going to be intel and counter-intel. And those are the least trustworthy people, like according to, to anyone on the outside. They'll say, "Oh, that guy's a spy. That guy was in CIA. How can we trust him?" Right? So, in a sense, it's perfectly ironic. I think that's what the situation would be, because it leaves it's a perfect, in the cosmic sense, looking at it from the outside. It's the perfect way for it to happen, because it leaves it totally open as like a free will decision. Right. Because people aren't going to just naturally believe a counterintelligence agent. People are going to distrust them. But so in the cosmic sense, it leaves open the possibility for people to either reject it or accept it. And that's like that's the way the world works. That's the way free will works. It's an unweighted choice that is presented to a person. Well, it's almost biblical. I just get biblical feelings when I think about it, because you can have this presentation of a message, and so you can choose to. It's kind of like Jesus. The scenario I had in mind was Jesus and like the tax collector, right? So you can have this message presented by this shady spy, this shady spook, and you can either go against all of your anti-spook programming to be like, maybe that's the truth. Maybe aliens actually are eating people. Like. Something like Jim Semivan might say or might imply. I don't think he's actually ever said that, but there are some hints about stuff going on in the behind the scenes. But or you could be someone who totally there are various options. There are various responses to a message presented in such a way, and that's kind of just a whole bunch of rambling thoughts. But just the closing thought on that is that I find it very interesting that the message is coming from counterintelligence people like Lou Elizondo, like David Grush, Jim Semivan of To the Stars, who works with Tom DeLonge. There's a lot of people in that kind of community that are coming forward with this kind of information. And then my idea about the ideal mindset for dealing with this situation being from an intelligence or counterintelligence background, because you're dealing with essentially what the world is essentially dealing with is a foreign power, a secret foreign power. It's like discovering that a new country exists that no one knew existed yet, and that they've had spies in our countries. They've been watching us. They've been watching our technology. They've been manipulating us. They've been meeting with personnel or like government personnel and establishing kind of sub rosa, like secret contacts. And imagine just suddenly learning that for the first time and being like, whoa, who are these people? What is this country? What are their intentions? How have they been able to do this? That's an intelligence and a counterintelligence problem. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. Just thoughts I've had in the last 15 minutes.
That's pretty fascinating. Go ahead, Laura.
I would add that it seems to me that that's probably one of the reasons why I was marginalized so fast and so early. I mean, just taken out of the game by accusations of being a cult, right, of being a kook, being channeling, but it's not, your usual channeling, and it's, the whole thing was just, it was an operation.
Mhm.
And it was undertaken very early in the game. And I mean, I have been marginalized to the point where, 15, 20 years ago, I could tell that Google was, shoving me way, way down, nowhere could I, and anything negative against, I mean, look on, what do you call it? What's that wiki about? What's it called,
Oh
Harrison?
yeah, yeah. I know what you're talking about. It's like not Wiki Spook, or something like that. Wiki. No, I can't remember what it is, but it's something like that.
It's some
Is it like
kind
a
of
skeptics thing? Like a skeptic,
Yeah.
wiki skeptic or something like that?
I mean, they have got the most outrageous crap and lies about me on that website. And even my husband, it's just so ridiculous. And that's part of the AI system. That's part of the
Well,
control.
Laura, what I told you is what they did to you is, and I've had these private conversations with you, like people that are high up in the quote unquote conspiratorial community, for whatever you want to call us. That's what they all say. Oh, she's a cult leader. That's what they labeled you. You were labeled a
Or
cult
is
leader. It's
is it
incredible
Rational
how many
Wiki?
high level people have said that to me.
Rational
She runs
Wiki.
a cult.
I knew what it was talking about. So
Rational
yeah.
Wiki.
Rational
Wow,
Wiki.
this
Yeah.
is like a whole entire hit piece on Laura. I haven't seen this, but I know the
Yeah.
website.
But
Wow,
it's
that is crazy.
but we actually have to give them credit at how illustriously, profoundly ingenious and insidious all of this is, that they do this to all of us. Now, Hunter can tell you, Laura, that they've done the same thing to me in the health space. My information has been buried for 13 years. I mean, very few people know who I am, and I've been saying stuff about biohacking 13 years ago that most people still don't even know about today. So I'm similar to you, and that's probably why we found each other. It's kind of the universe, it's the networking. But I wanted to ask you a question that's even really more important, because that long-winded, whatever Harrison even phrases a diatribe, I thought it was fascinating. But I mean, he was talking about it from a cosmic angle. What if it's just a natural evolution? Like, this is what is happening because we have to, as Ra said, choose to positively polarize to make it out. And to make it out, we have to become aware of all of this dubious, the duping, the chicanery, the insanity of it. And so that's where, to me, like, it turned on. I mean, the lights came on as he was saying all those things, that from the cosmic angle, that this is just a necessary part of our paths.
It is, to a certain extent. Indeed, it is. Because, I mean, it's like the Seas once said, if would you give the keys to a car to a 4-year-old? And if you have the ability to drive yourself or your reality in the way that we've just described, as producing like cybergenetic probes and so on and so forth, do you think you're ready to graduate to that level of reality if you can't drive the car? So it's, to a certain extent, that's part of it. But people have to keep in mind that there are the two pathways. There is service to self and there is service to others. And according to Ra, you have to have a very heavy duty, strong tendency to service to self to be able to graduate. Those who are on the path of service to others don't have to achieve such a high score, because if they are involved with a network, the cumulative totals of all the network, act in their favor.
And they say 51%, right? That's it. You just have to be 51%.
You have to be, what was it for STS? It's like
95,
like 94 or 95. Yeah.
95% evil, but only 51% good. So
yeah, that's easy.
Well, it's not so easy to be 51% good. I don't think it's
not in today's day and age.
Not in today. No, it's so rotten out there that I would say that most people aren't at like 10 or 15%. You know, they're just not good.
Well, that's actually a good point, Laura, because I think, and Hunter and I talk about this all the time, but when you say it's rotten out there, it is, but the power structures support being nefarious. They support being deceptive. They support lying. I mean, again, the majority of people in the global public would prefer to be lied to, witness religion, rather than be told the truth. And once they are told the truth, it's instantly abhorred, it's instantly attacked, it's instantly put down. I mean, it's incredible to see how this has all been arranged in third density to ultimately, you know, Harrison just said, just all you have to do is be 51% good and you can make it out. But few people even can do that. How many times has it taken us, and how many go rounds of all four of us has it taken for us to get to a point now where we are choosing the path most of the time of service to others? That's the real question.
Yeah.
One thing, go ahead, Laura.
No.
One thing is, Harrison, I was having just like epiphanies. I was like, mic drop. That was incredible, dude.
It was.
I was thinking about information systems. And we live, like you were saying, it's biblical. We live in this top-down information system to where it's here and then it gets distributed, and then we're kind of like left to fight through the scraps of, okay, we hear this, and now let's piece this together, and we're kind of going along this and this. I think not only do you see it in the government, but there's the military industrial complex, and now there's the technology industrial complex that has not only government agents in counterintelligence, but influencers, authors, content creators, and everything. And whether those people, I think some are knowingly involved. I think others are unknowingly involved because they create material that then is rewarded by the structure, call it the algorithm, call it different, whatever. I mean, we talked about that guy, Wesley Huff, Laura, that I showed you his graph of like all the material. And then all of a sudden it like goes logarithmic to where like when you start putting out certain information, it gets rewarded in that material. And I was thinking, okay, so we have this top-down counterintelligence program that's running on us. Would the counter be a bottom-up one? And Harrison and I talked about this when we just talked with each other of the C's really being an iteration of kind of like a cosmic / hyperdimensional internet. And if we can't, because if you went to the government or like Google as the source of information and we didn't know any better, that would be the worst thing that we could do. So you're operating in this pond that is a scum pond. And meanwhile, there's like ponds all around, but you can't get access to those. So what is the counter? And I think, Laura, to your credit, to like, as far as I know, was the first instance of hyperdimensional information that maybe is the counter. So is the counter to it like avoiding the top-down information system structure and then kind of crowdsourcing through a network and our communication with each other? Because we can come together and have conversations like this, that we can, I won't say create new knowledge in a way, but each fire neural networks in our brain to like, oh, now that makes sense of how it is. And now when I go see something in the news that I might think was true before, now I have discernment to kind of act against that counterintelligence that's being fed to me. So what, I guess my counter is like, does that make sense? One, and then like, what is the bottom up networking structure? And I think we're all working on it, but like, what does that look like for us going forward? Because it's going to be like, I think become infinitely harder in the future as like more and more top-down information gets saturated on us.
Well, we've had, like I said, you know, we've published everything for free on the net because I know that there are people who can't get access to books and materials. And I wanted it to be available. We publish in multiple languages. Harrison's got his Substack. We've got a forum where, you know, I mean, but obviously everything we do is suppressed. We've been doing this for 30 years and we are still suppressed. In fact, probably more suppressed than ever before. But so far, as Harrison has proven with his book, as far as I can, you know, see, everything the C's have said, you know, 75 to 80% of it at least, has checked out. I mean, he is, you know, I did research to the extent of my ability when I was writing The Wave back in 2000, 2001. And it ended up being 6, 7 volumes or something. And Harrison picked up and, went with it. He wrote the Cassiopaean hit list, which is really impressive when you read it. I mean, it's tremendously impressive. And now he's got this Substack with all of these articles where he has been pulling on, the sources that were not available at that time. He's been pulling on the government whistleblowers. He's been pulling on, more research that other people have done, like the Skinwalker Ranch, and comparing that to what happened with the Mothman at Point Pleasant, and then the other case he was talking about, and so many different things that it kind of, it does kind of suggest that the seas are the information source, the cosmic retrieval system, so to speak, for information that is as accurate as we're going to get it in this reality. I mean, it has stood the test of time. It's 30 years I've been doing this, and I wouldn't be doing it if it hadn't changed my life dramatically for the better, done it for many, many other people, and if it hadn't proven to be, a viable source of information that made freaking sense out of this weird reality we live in. So that's my statement on it. Go for it.
Well, to that point too, Laura, how much of that information 30 years ago from the government is, I would say 99% of anything that came from government or mainstream media in 1994 to today was wrong. You can look at like what they talked about with news, politics, wars, health, global affairs, whatever you have it. Shoot, even today, most of what comes out of any like mainstream institution is going to be misinformation or disinformation. So that is because I've never thought about it. If you like stack up the information that we have access to and say, okay, look at what was said in 1994, 1995 from the government to the seas has said, what has stood more of the test of time? Well, it sure as hell wasn't anything that came out of mainstream academia, mainstream science, mainstream news, or anything like that versus what you guys have been doing. So that's an interesting thought to kind of think like, okay,
Harrison, do you cover Willie Tompkins at all in the book?
I made one or two very brief mentions of him, but I haven't read his stuff yet. So it was just a very brief.
So Willie
reference.
Tompkins in his books, which are very weird and very interesting at the same time, because I would assume that, being that he was a compartmentalized, deep black guy, was allowed to speak at the end when there was no one left. But he said that the reptilians had inverted everything, that there was nothing in our educational system going back thousands of years that was not inverted. And I mean, he says that very clearly in those books. And that was the one thing that I read in that book that this is before I was aware of Laura's work. Well, actually, not really. I was aware of your other work, but not The Wave. When I read that book, it was like 4 years ago, I want to say. And it was like, wow. And he was very serious about that and he also did some videos, which by the way, are disappeared. Good luck finding interviews with Willie Tompkins on Google. They're all gone. There's nothing. There's like clips. People have clips of him. But it's crazy. But he said that. He said they inverted everything. All educational systems of learning were inverted.
Well, so I'll respond to that, the original question, and kind of take off from what you just said there, Jay.
Sure.
So Hunter had brought up this idea of kind of top down and bottom up. And I'd say for the bottom up approach, I'll just say that pretty much Laura said all that, and that for someone in that position, from the perspective of a person who's in the situation of trying to discern what's going on, the networking involved is finding other people, researching, sharing ideas, battling out that back and forth of ideas in your mind and with other people to kind of come to an understanding of something. Keep that goal in mind of what you're actually looking for. And that's kind of that going on at this bottom level. and then the top down is a different animal. So the top down, you have information from authoritative sources that filters down to the people. Now that is it's an invariant process. Like, that's always going to happen. You're always going to have information that is or originates in the top and filters down. That's just a constant. The question is the nature of that information, and how it stacks up. So that's where the bottom up meets the top down, is that through networking, through maybe, hopefully having some kind of access to that cosmic retrieval system, whether it's through your own intuition or through, your own, if through your own intuition, then hopefully refined through a process of networking with other people, so you don't just get lost in your own ideas and think you've got the whole picture when maybe you don't. But through that refining of ideas through networking, then you can look at the top down information and evaluate it, because there are some things that come top down that are actually true. It's not always just these like bald-faced lies. Like, sometimes it's true. Sometimes that truth is part of a disinformation plot, because you filter, you include some lies with the truth, but sometimes it's the truth. So that at least gives you a possible standard by which to evaluate and judge that top-down information. And so that's the way I kind of look at it, because the way I see it is that there's kind of there are battles going on everywhere behind the scenes, different factions of different groups, and some of them, either they want the truth to come out, or it's in their interest for parts of the truth to come out. I'm just interested in seeing what comes out, and because there are big stakes involved, like my whole diatribe about this counterintelligence operation. Like, the truth is important in this situation. The situation that humanity finds itself in, it's important for the truth to be known as widely as possible. It may never be known to any great degree, who knows, but it's at least important. So that's why I'm interested in it. And that's why I'm interested in trying to discern these games going on behind the scenes and the way they play out in the public. So you can look at, like, even the JFK and the RFK file, releases, right? I wasn't expecting any smoking gun, because I don't believe there are any smoking guns. I think if there were, those documents have been long destroyed. But I was still very happy to see those documents released, and the fact that there are some very interesting things that were released or that came out because of those releases. And so I find that interesting. I think that's a positive trend, with the possibility of there could be some chaos dynamics going on, some butterfly wings that result just from the release of all those documents, because there was all kinds of stuff that was, unrelated to JFK, but it was just stuff the CIA wanted covered up, because you could see what kind of what kind of hijinks they were up to around this time period, and just the methods that they were used, that a lot of people kind of know or suspected. But it's good it's nice to have it in black and white, from their own typewriters at the time. And just to bring this back to the issue of UFOs and aliens, so I see the bottom up as a way of kind of trying to discern and come to our own understanding that is hopefully as close to the truth as possible, or at least with that as a goal in mind, and then to be able to engage in that in just as we try to come to that in understanding by engaging with each other, we can then engage with the information that's coming from official sources, and to try to gauge and judge that too. It's like, that's what I was doing with this book. And when I'm quoting all of those government insiders and stuff, like, I'm looking at the things that they're saying and being like, well, isn't that interesting that they're saying, like, some of the things that I actually either thought for myself or had found in this, in this Cassiopaean material. Well, there seems to be a mesh there. Well, isn't that interesting? And if that continues, well, that will be very interesting. If it stops and all of a sudden the message changes, that will be very interesting too. And that might give some hints about stuff that is going on. But so, I will have a lot more to say about this over the next year, because I know that things are in process right now, and there's going to be a new UFO hearing in a month in Congress, and David Grush will have been instrumental in setting that one up and suggesting the witnesses and all of that, because he's working for Congressman Eric Burleson right now. So he's got the like kind of inside track in Congress to move things in certain directions. So it'll be very interesting to see where this all leads. And I expect this next year, the rest of this year, to be at the very least very interesting and perhaps very interesting, and perhaps even shocking. But I don't know if things will get to that level or not.
So, question for you, Laura: if the Seas tell us that the government is a world government, and it's still controlled by, call it, service to self forces. I mean, we think that there may be some rebellion. Maybe Trump isn't completely under their yoke. Obviously, the system is corrupt as hell. Won't it just be whatever is revealed, what he's alleging to be just more Machiavellian, maybe crazy, and we'll all be wide eyed, because obviously every time you guys do a session, the Seas say great things are coming. I mean, more and more shocking things or revelational things are coming. I mean, won't it just be more of a service to self reveal in some capacity?
Well, I think that it's highly likely that it's going to be more obfuscation, more layers of lies, and we are going to be continuously challenged to, as Harrison just described, use our bottom-up method, asking the universe what the hell is going on, and see how that matches with what the information they're sending, dropping down to us, and what we can observe ourselves, what we're aware of, using our brains, because let's face it, our brain is our greatest gift from the universe, from the creator, whatever. And people just don't use them. And all these people that are, using the AI, and I mean, they're just completely turning their brains to tapioca. But I expect, for every true revelation, there's going to be 5 deceptive diversions or something, and 5 people saying, "Oh no, that's I mean, I've noticed it's a pattern. Whenever anybody comes out and tells something and I listen to it, I say, that's exactly what the Seas said, and that's exactly what I thought, even in before the Seas said it or after the Seas said it, and I proved it because I did some research or whatever." And then that person, sure enough, next day, he gets exposed for being, whatever, some kind of he's either a pedophile, or he's got, he's doing drugs, or, I mean, they attack in very standard ways. And, that's why when they started going after Donald Trump, I knew what was going on, because I had been attacked in exactly the same way. Maybe not the exact same terms or verbiage, but exactly the same way. I mean, it was just monstrous. It came from all angles. I mean, Harrison lived through most of it with me. He knows what happened. So, yeah. I mean, they attacked my children, my family, my friends, my work, my reputation, my, everything, literally everything, and accused me of the most vile, just the most vile things imaginable. Yeah.
Well,
So
I think
go ahead.
it's interesting too. I want to ask you, Laura, in terms of those attacks. I think anyone that goes along this path, we've talked about this a little bit before. There's kind of like these like rebound mechanisms or rubber bands. Like once you start like poking the bear a little bit, they kind of like shoot you back. And then there's a coordinated like third density attack, to which it's like people and information in third density. But I think too, I would have never guessed this in my life until I started kind of poking the bear too, is there's hyperdimensional attacks, and they can be what they are is it's hard for us to determine at the time in nature, but we kind of feel it intuitively, and something does not feel right. And that could be people that get introduced into our lives that don't make sense as to where they are. And then all of a sudden we find ourselves getting angry. So I tell Jay now, like whenever like someone will either be in our community or people that we meet or whatever. And I find myself, because I'm a pretty laid back person for the most part, and I find myself getting irrationally angry about either what that person is saying. I immediately now, and this is, I think, where the awareness is so important, go back to organic portal. And I start asking myself, is this person kind of like a zombot or a zombie being thrown at me because I'm either working on something that's important to the nature of everything that we're all contributing to each other? And I think, again, there's the coordinated third density attack, but I think people should be aware too that once you go down this path, there is hyperdimensional attacks, and there's people, places, things, different life experiences that kind of come at you that do not operate in the confines of like a third density type attack, but it's very real, and it's very, it goes to our emotions, and it goes to our psyche and those things. And I will say, I think, as divine timing would have it, along the lines of like what Jay and I have been doing kind of in the health space, a lot of these things started happening. I'm so thankful I found your work, because now I have a lot better tools to understand some of the people or things that I've come across as more or less not the third density attack, but kind of that hyperdimensional attack.
I tell you, once you start, I mean, the movie The Matrix was a really great metaphor. Once you start, like you said, poking the bear or wiggling within the matrix, or going against the confluence of ideas, events, the way things are structured, the system. I mean, it's a system, and it brings everything to bear to put you back to sleep, to destroy you if you refuse to go back to sleep. The numbers of ways and means it has to come at you is just absolutely unbelievable, even including affecting the mental states of people who are close to you, turning them against you, causing discord and disruption between people who had always been in close accord or whatever. It's the ways and means are just amazing. And I don't know if you guys have read the books. There's a series of books which is kind of interesting, extremely interesting, in fact. And those are the books of Boris Muraviev, his Gnosis trilogy. So if you get a chance to pick those up and read them, he's got a lot right, and he's got a lot right. I think he relied in some areas of his exposition on some esotericists or occultists of the European groups that were not very helpful. So even those books have been corrupted to some extent, but there's some stuff in there that's really fascinatingly interesting, and you'll probably be able to discern, what it is. So again, it describes how things can turn against you when you go against the system, and how these things can act on you, and they can act on you through, I mean, sometimes even physical events, like having a car accident, or falling off a ladder, or because you get distracted for a moment, or having your husband or your wife suddenly suspect you of drinking in the closet, or your children are a big source, because they are vulnerable.
Yes.
And they can be used against you in ways you can't even imagine. I have 5 children, and I can tell you, sometimes it can be agonizing. And that's why when you have children, you have to teach them about these things so they can't be used. And that's not an easy task. So, yeah, it's we're in for an interesting roller coaster ride, I think. I mean, it's not boring.
No, it's awesome. I mean, it's a fascinating time to be alive. I mean, Harrison, we're up on 2 hours. I mean, I can keep going if you guys want to, but to be fair to Laura, I know it's getting late back there, but are there any topics or discussion points that we really haven't covered that you wanted to maybe mention?
There was nothing really that I think I had those couple ideas that I hadn't written about yet that I shared today.
Sure.
So I think that just I didn't really have anything that I felt the need to get out right away, at this time. So I would just say that I just plug the book again and say, if you're interested in any of these topics, to check out the book, and if you can't afford the book, then to just go to Cassiopaea.substack.com to check it out, because I'm interested in a lot of things, and this topic is just one of them. But I think it's a very interesting topic, and I'm not, and it always confuses me that other people don't find it as interesting as I do. So, yeah, I'd say if you want to get your mind blown a little bit by some weird stuff that might actually be real, then check it out.
I'd have to say you're an organic portal if you're not mind blown by this. You did want to talk to Laura about mental blocking. In your conversation.
This was, yeah, okay. Well, it's kind of out of nowhere, but so I mentioned earlier the chapter in the book on protection against alien abduction, and at one point the CIS called one of the techniques mental blocking. Now, Laura has written about this, or at least mentioned it sometimes, but Laura, there hasn't been a place yet where it's all kind of put together all nicely. And I'm pretty sure I remember you saying at some point that mental blocking was a part of your kind of channeling methodology. And I was just wondering if you could summarize or just briefly state what that state of mind is. Like, what would an example of mental blocking just in either everyday life be, or in the context of channeling, or another if neither of those apply?
Well, it's really simple to say it, but I'm not sure that it's that simple to implement it. But it consists in just saying no, and saying no with your whole being to something that is invasive or coercive or whatever. And a couple of examples I think that are in the sessions, it's like Terry and Jan described their visit to a casino in Las Vegas, and how they were approached by a guy who was
strange man.
A strange man, yeah. And at a certain point, Terry just got up in his face and said, listen here, do we have a problem? Because his whole body was saying no.
Yeah.
And the guy just backed off. In a sense, it's like what people say about bullies. If you stand up to a bully, they back down, because bullies are really essentially cowards. In my own what I considered to be kind of a semi-abduction experience. I don't know how real it was, because me, I don't, I think that a lot of things happen in the mind, or they happen on a spiritual level, or on a fourth density level, or whatever. They're not actually happening physically. I'm not sure. But, I woke up with these guys trying to haul me out of my bed to take me up to the ceiling of my house. And I reached up and I had grabbed hold of the brass, it was one of these brass headboards with like pipes, and grabbed hold of it. And I mean, the whole bed was just shaking with the effort of them to try to drag me out, and me hanging on. And then at a certain point, once I forced myself to become conscious, to have my eyes partly open, because there was this overwhelming sense of like being drugged, so to speak. And you just have to like force your eyes open, and you have to force your awareness. And it was just like, all of a sudden this sound came up out from inside of me, which was a shouting, like a spiritual shouting of no. And they twittered and looked at each other and didn't know what to do, and then they just kind of went away. And then the funny thing is, because I can't tell you how real that was, but what was really real, that I can tell you was real, was I woke up gripping the I had
the headboard,
the headboard thing, and I was gripping it so hard that I actually had to reach up with the other hand to peel my fingers back to get my hand down. And then there was an even much earlier incident, and some of this stuff occurs like in dreamlike states, where I was battling a dragon, kind of like the scenario at the end of Sleeping Beauty, where he's got the dragon and he's jumping back and forth with his sword, and whatever. And it was, something similar to that. And once again, it was roaring no, and that's at a spiritual level. It's not something you do with your voice, although you may give voice to it. But it's a no. It's an utter, absolute, and complete rejection. Refusal. Refusal to be maneuvered and manipulated. And as soon as that happened, it was like the dragon was like one of these blow-up balloons that somebody, hadn't tied it off yet, and then they just let go of it, and it goes, flies all over the ground and just deflates. And it was kind of a funny thing. But was that real, or was that some part of my subconscious teaching me a lesson about it? Because it later came in handy. So I think that, and I mean, if you think about what Ross said about it, he said that the STO position has to refuse the manipulation of the STS side, for the sake of retaining their own polarity. So, it's refusal at a soul level.
Yeah. By the way, that conversation that you were referring you told that story in book 3, and were they grays?
They seemed like grays to me. They were a little taller than the usual average, the average gray that I'd ever seen or thought of. And they were more spider-like.
Yeah.
And had, they were kind of spidery, and they were really freaky critters. And
have you ever tried to draw a picture of them?
No.
She's like, I don't want to. I mean, wasn't what Crowley saw or conjured lamb? Wasn't that a gray being in and of itself? I mean, aren't they always that?
Yeah. So all the pictures I've seen other people have drawn of grays they're all fairly similar. And they were just a little taller, and their arms and legs were a little skinnier, if that's possible. And more spider, and they twittered. That was the thing that kind of freaked me out, was they, when they weren't getting things weren't working the way it was supposed to work. And I was resisting. I wasn't supposed to be resisting, and they weren't able to do what they were trying to do. So they started, like jittering and twittering, at each other, and then.
Well, by the way, Laura, I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Jupiter Ascending. I know Hunter's seen it. That actually is exactly what the Greys do in that movie. When they're attempting to abduct in another scene, they start. It's the girl, the quote unquote princess, and she's resisting, and they're twittering, and it's a very eerie. There's so much reality, I think, can be how would I say, just given to us in that movie of like what's going on, but it's also just like a schlocky Hollywood B movie where they
another Wachowski brothers movie.
Exactly.
That's what I was going to say. They did the Matrix.
Get it right.
Well, now that they're Wachowski sisters, which is kind of funny. They're the embodiment of like that, and the whole transhuman thing of like no gender, confused about gender. Very weird. Also very weird too. Jay has talked to him. There's a guy that claims, and he has a pretty good claim. I forget the name of his website. He actually wrote the Matrix series, and they stole it from him. And then
what is that guy's name? I forgot.
I forget his name, dude. It was
well, there are a bunch of claims like that, but wasn't one guy, wasn't it Grant Morrison, the comic book writer?
Yeah, it
didn't
was
make
him
any
and this
a big
other
deal
guy
about
that I
it.
interviewed. No, they were connected. Grant Morrison was connected to this other guy that I interviewed. I can't
Okay.
think of his name. Is it Tom?
He was
something?
an actual like I forget his name. I can see
Yeah,
his
he was
face
a
right
Hollywood
now.
screenwriter. He was a Hollywood
Yeah, I mean,
screenwriter.
he was like pretty big Hollywood screenwiter, not like a big name, but he had written a lot of stuff, and he wrote that, and then they came and stole it from him, and then like completely, again, disinformation campaign turned his kids against him and all this stuff, and I forget his name, but it's out there. If I'm sure people can find it if you look it up, but kind of funny how all that comes full circle to the agenda of today with AI. Crazy.
You guys have
Well, just
to
as a
remember, I'm 73.
We could keep Laura going all night.
I'll just give a little preview. I mentioned earlier that an article on the Greys is coming up, but I noticed this for the first time. I hadn't remembered this, but in one of the sessions, it's the session where Laura's asking about all of these drawings from this Blue Planet Project book or Project Pulsar. There's a couple names for it, and there's all kinds of really nice like comic book style drawings of different alien species.
Sure.
And in one of them, she says, "Oh, that looks like those little guys that I saw," and so that a potential drawing that looks kind of like what Laura was describing will be in the.
Well, by the way, I
article when
have
it
those
comes out.
books, Laura. Hold on, let me just grab one of these real quick. So somebody gave these to me.
I don't even remember that.
So somebody gave me these books. You called it the Blue Planet Project, but like,
Yeah.
it's this one, like the remote viewing aliens. So they're all like soft bound. And somebody gave these to me, and there's like 90 of them. And I've probably read like 35 of them. Some of them is like complete disinfo, but obviously there's definitely bits and pieces of like, whoa, like what is going on? I wish I knew who was that wrote all these books.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's Gil
Carlson.
Carlson. Yep.
Gil Carlson.
But the guy who allegedly wrote the Project Blue Planet booklets is a guy named Jeff D'Souza, and I just did a bunch of research on that to try to figure out what was going on. And let's just say that's a really interesting story, but it's for another time because there's no time to get into it.
We'll do it. We'll come back again, Jay, and we can talk about that. There's other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I know. We could. This is. I mean, this was episode 9.
You can even get it ready so you can display all of these different aliens, on the screen.
Well, I think Harrison's got that coming. So, all right. Well, I'll let you guys go. So for all of you guys out there, and by the way, it's amazing when we do these because we get more and more people as we go. Like it's seemingly from the audience, it's just getting interesting to them now because we have like over 650 people watching live. They're like, don't go.
Hi, people.
Bye, people.
Bye, people. Next time.
All right. So again, for Jay Campbell, Hunter Williams, Laura Knight-Jadczyk, and Harrison Koehli, please get his amazing book, Beyond Disclosure. It's on Amazon. And if you have already read it or are in the process of reading it, please leave him a 5-star Amazon review because it's literally, I think, one of the most influential, impactful books that has been published in a long time. Again, as we're signing off, more and more people are coming on, but everyone out there, raise your vibration to optimize your love creation. We will see all of you guys very soon.